Well, let's start. Thank you very much for coming today. Now, today actually is an extremely bad day to be doing stress management. Why do you think that might be?
Fine day.
It's a beautiful day, right? You want to do stress management, it should be cold and miserable.
And a Monday.
And a Monday, thank you. Perfect, right? It should be a really lousy day. That's when you want to do stress management, not a beautiful blue sky, clear day like today. That begs a question. When you wake up in the morning and it is cold and it's raining and it's dark and it's a Monday, how do you feel? How do you feel normally? What do you think? How's your mood normally?
Suppressed.
Suppressed, yeah. Bit bleak, maybe. Okay, how about we wake up like today? It's a beautiful day. Blue skies, sun shining, not too cold, not too warm, lovely. How do you feel?
Like playing.
Feel good, right? Feel positive. Here's one of the tricks of managing stress. First rule is, we don't let ourselves be controlled by the weather. And if we wake up in the morning and we feel bad because it's cold, gloomy and rainy, that's not very good. If we wake up in the morning and we feel great because it's sunny and warm and wonderful, that's not great either. That means that our mood is at the random selection of weather. And if you think about it, a lot of people are driven that way. Their mood for the day is determined in the morning by the weather. So they said, okay, I abdicate responsibility for my mood and I'm going to place it in the hands of random weather selection. So the same with stress. We need to be thinking about control over our mood. And first thing is to control how we feel about the day. So whether we get up in the morning and it's gloomy or it's wonderful, we determine we're going to have a positive mood. We don't let the weather control our emotion. And that sounds simplistic, but we're coming into winter and I'm sure we're going to have many gloomy, cold and rainy, difficult days. See how you go in controlling your mood. That's a good starting point on managing our stress. And we're going to cover a number of things today. There are different types of stresses, have different impacts on us. And what are some techniques for handling that? And then some strategies, and then how to be more productive. We're going to start with, you might remember, there was a US Airways flight 1489 that hit a flock of Canadian geese and the engines were lost. And the pilot landed the plane on the Hudson River and was hailed as a terrific hero. And he made this comment as the pilot, even though both engines gone, no engines. You're up high with a lot of people and there's this big Manhattan thing below you, right? We're going to park it. And he said, I wasn't afraid because I had something to do. What we're looking at today is to try and come out of this session with something to do when you have stress. And I mentioned at lunch before, I talked about, we did a lot of these sessions after the earthquake. And who was here during the earthquake and thereafter? A couple of us, right? If you recall, we were having 6, 7 major earthquakes every day for weeks after the major earthquake. I mean, in English we call them aftershocks, which sort of has an implication of a little rumble. They weren't little rumbles. These were like major earthquakes in their own right. And 6 and 7 a day. And I remember sitting at my desk trying to work, and then, of course, being Tokyo, you think every earthquake is the big one. And you're bracing for that, so your adrenaline's racing, your mind's racing, and you're preparing yourself. So your emotions are up and down, all day long. And I was sitting there thinking, oh God, I can't concentrate. This is killing me. I cannot do my work. And I thought to myself, it can't just be me. There must be lots of people around Japan and around Tokyo who are going through this too. So what can I do? What can I do to take control of this situation which I have no control over? So we decided, okay, let's give free training. Let's offer them Japanese and English public courses. We'll also go to all our clients and say, we'll come and do training for free for your teams. And we started to do that. And it was instant. The minute we decided to do that, our whole mood as an office picked right up. Individually, we started to deal with those aftershocks and the adrenaline rush much, much better because we had something to do. We had something in our mind that we could do, something proactive, something positive. And it turned our mood around. And then by doing courses like this one today, we started to impact on the people we were training. And they started to turn their mood and their ideas around too. So we saw for ourselves how important it is to take action and to start looking for the positive outcome and deciding that's what you're going to do. And make a decision, I'm going to do something positive and then do it, which is what hopefully we'll get to today. So, this is some research on stress. Now, we know that psychosomatic power over our physical condition is very strong. We know that just by thinking, we can affect our health. If we're thinking very negatively, if we get into depression, get a lot of stress, it has, as you see here, high numbers for direct impact on our physical health. We didn't know about psychosomatic illnesses in the past, but we got lots of medical research today. We know that is a reality. So if I asked you to hold something, say I had something rather heavy, it doesn't have to be that heavy, but even that cup, if I asked you to hold that cup while I gave this talk today, after about 5 minutes your arm would begin to shake, even with the weight of that cup, because you're holding something and it's starting to have an impact on you, a physical impact, and then you need to release it. We do the same with stress. We hold it and it starts to have that physical impact because we've got to find a way to release it. Most people don't have a release mechanism, or they choose poor choices like alcohol, right, which is extremely, even more depressive aspects to it. So the choice selection is not good. So we know we should be doing something about it. But what do we do about it? So again, we know that our life is what our thoughts make it. Okay, this is a very old idea from Marcus Aurelius, and even in the Bible you'll see references to, as a man thinketh, this sort of thing. All of these old sayings from Shakespeare, from the Bible, it's a common thing. In your manuals, you will see a survey. Yes, page 2. Would you mind take a moment and fill that survey out? How did you go? How did you go on your scoring? Did you find yourself not being described like this, or did you find this matched your own thinking about stressful situations? How was your result? Makoto, how was your result?
I think it fits me.
Yeah? So you felt that there were some of these things that were matched for you?
Yes.
So,
except the sleeping hours.
Yep.
That was wonderful.
You're getting 8 hours. You're doing brilliantly. That's wonderful.
Yeah, I don't.
Oh, you don't? Oh, that's what you mean. Okay, yes. You're not getting enough sleep. I see.
So that should be 1, right?
Right. Yes. That's right. How about everybody else? How did you go?
Well, it goes ways.
Some were good. Some were not so good. Yeah.
Mostly good.
Yeah. How about you, Jeff? How'd it go in the back there?
Well, humorously, I'm here, right? So I do need help managing stress. But I realized that, like the number 14, I used to be involved in more doing. When I'm in stress, I get physical exercise, working out. But I used to do like Tai Chi and yoga. So I realized maybe some of the most effective things I don't do anymore.
So you had a mechanism, but you suspended that mechanism probably because you're too
Busy raising children and,
Yeah, right,
and working.
exactly.
Yeah.
So again, it comes down to there are things we can do. We have to choose that we're going to put the priority on those things. Ellie, how'd you go?
Something applies to me, someone else.
Yeah. So for most of us, there's a bit of a mixture. Some things we're doing okay. Some things we're not doing okay. This number 13. Periodically remind myself to slow down. Sometimes we just completely forget that part. We forget to remind ourselves, I focus on my strengths and my weaknesses. Again, we can be very critical of ourselves. We put extra pressure on ourselves. We're focusing on the negative side of things. So on the next page, on page 3, the little space there, I'd like you to divide that into two parts, put it right down the middle, and on the left side make it professional, on the right side make it personal. So you got professional and personal, two sections. Just write down some positive news, something positive in your professional life, and find something positive in your personal life to record it. So just please take a moment and do that.
That's
So how we go? Did we find some positive news? Everyone found some positive news you could share? Here's a question. Why don't we uncover more positive news in our home environment or our work environment? You think about, when was the last time you were in a home or a work environment where good news was coming out? You know, people were sharing it, or was being brought out from the management or whatever. Did you find that? Did you find in the group there, you're mainly dealing with bad news and problems, or are you dealing with good news? What's the balance? It's normally bad news, isn't it? It's normally what's going wrong.
Yeah.
But if we want to control our environment and how we feel about it, that positive part and the balance of life is a critical thing. And finding there are positive, everyone here found something positive, both in your professional life and your personal life. And that starts to help you to build up your resilience. And you've also been given this paper from the Mayo Clinic in the States, which is, we're not going to go through this now, I'll leave it with you. This is an excellent extract on being resilient. Resilience in the sense of being strong in the face of trouble, pressure and stress, and having the determination to go beyond that, not be controlled by the circumstances. Excellent. And in the Mayo Clinic's study, they found a couple of things. They found that resilient people tend to use humour. They tend to be using humour to try and spark up themselves and those around them. Very interesting. They draw on their experiences to find strength. They go back into where they've been strong in the past, or where they've been successful in the past, or where they've had a personal, powerful, positive experience in the past, and focus on that, as opposed to the glass is half full, what's wrong, what's going the wrong way for me. On the negative side, they actually determine, I'm going to push it over to the positive side, which they found helped them to become more resilient in the face of stresses and strains. They also found a couple of other things, that they understand that things will change, and that they accept change. Now, some people are very stubborn, and they don't want to change, and they won't accept change, and they suffer. They suffer because, I don't know about your experience, but for me, something seems to have sped up in the last 10 years, that the speed of change seems to be getting more and more fast. I don't know, maybe it's just me getting older, but it seems to be getting faster. It seems that change is more permanent. Nothing seems to stay the same. Even the weather, in the last 10 years, 15 years has really changed, and you notice it. So things you can't control. So if you're clinging to non-change, you're going to be stressed to the max. So people who are resilient understand that there's going to be change, and they accept that there is change. They accept that they can't change everything themselves in the face of that change. They just have to put up with certain things and understand that they need to move on and be positive within that framework. The other things they found for resilient people were that they had goals. They took control. I wasn't afraid because I had something to do. It was that comment from the pilot of that 1489 flight from American Airways. The same thing. People who are resilient set goals for themselves, and they have that focus. Here's a way out. Here's something I'm going to give my energy and attention to, and I'm going to let this occupy my mind rather than all the things that are going wrong and all the problems I'm having. Also, they work on their self-esteem. They work on keeping themselves very positive, so they look for uplifting things to read. If we work on the basis that we are what we think, and I think today we all know we basically are what we think, then what you think becomes very important, and often what you think is a diet of what you see on TV, what you're reading in magazines, newspapers, on the web, etc., and what you're hearing from the people around you. So people who are controlling their esteem are avoiding people who are negative. They're probably not watching a great deal of TV because none of it's too positive, but sort of the news. And they're probably controlling very carefully what they're putting into their mind. And certainly people who are trying to get themselves up out of a bottomless pit of despair have to be very, very careful about what goes in here and what they place in there. So again, looking for positive things in your professional and personal life, giving yourself a steady diet of positive information and uplifting things has an impact on your mood. And so again, we can control that. We don't have to be subject to random distribution of what happens to be on TV or what happens to be in the newspaper or what happens to be in blogs or what happens to be online on Facebook or Twitter or whatever it might be. So this is what the Mayo Clinic found was working very well for resilience, and it's something that works for us too. And also, last point there is self-examination, where we look into ourselves and look for the positives. Look for the positives. So in Dale Carnegie, we have 2 methodologies for reflection on anything we do. And that's when we're evaluating anything, as far as role plays with each other or the training or whatever. We always say, what did we do that was good? What was that? And in particular, we're working with partners, we ask them feedback. What was good about your partner's role play? So we look for what they're doing that's already working. Because sometimes we're not aware of it. Sometimes a third party can see something we can't see. And you didn't know, oh, I didn't see that. Oh, okay, I'll work on that. And then the second thing we look at is how do we make it better? So there's nothing negative around this. It's a critique from a positive direction. It is a critique because it's something that can be done better. It's not, well, what are we doing wrong? What's going to the dogs here? What's hopeless? Let's concentrate on all the past and all the negative and all the things we can't change. We switch that and we say, we're going forward, how do we make it better? We're already doing some things good. Let's see what we can do even better with some other things. So if you think about that in terms of self-examination, as opposed to beating yourself up, what am I doing that's good? What can I do better? As a reflection. And this article on resilience, I think you'll find it's very, 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 very handy. And please have a look at that later. On page 4, there are lists types of stress, but it's all blank. You see? This is for you to put down. So just take a moment. What types of stress do you embrace here? What types of stress do you encounter? What types of stress are you running into? So just please take a moment and make a note. So it looks like we've gotten quite a few of those down. Again, in your groups, just share with each other what types of stresses that you are encountering and get an idea what other people are facing as well. Please take a moment, share that with each other. So how do we go? You know, when you are sharing these stresses, did you notice that, you know what, I'm not the only one here. Like some of you mentioned about your kids' homework. I'm standing here going, yeah, I know about that with my son, you know. It's similar, isn't it? Sometimes we just get to share that. We start to realise that we're not in isolation. We're not particularly special in the sense of having stress, that others have got similar stresses. I'd like you to pick from that list the one thing that's stressing you the most. Just make a selection, the one thing. And I'd ask you to nominate that one thing to your team. And I'd like the team to give you some advice on what they think you could do to fix that. And then share your one thing with each other and get the other people to help you with some advice on how to fix it. So please select one thing and then get some advice. Please go ahead. Let's move on a little bit. We're not going to actually go through this just for the time we have today, but on page 5, it's a very interesting exercise you might want to do later, is look at someone you know who is resilient. And as I say, this article from the Mayo Clinic on resilience is a really excellent article, so please look at that. And then think about someone you know who's resilient and why you think they are resilient. What are they doing? And then think about yourself. What are some of your strengths? Because often when we're stressed, we focus on our weak point, we focus on our shortcomings, we focus on things that drive us even further down, when in fact we do have strength, we do have resilience. There have been times in the past where we've actually come out of something and worked out. And again, we won't go through it today because we don't have time, but on page 6, about rebuilding your attitude, you're taking statements like, I feel helpless, to, well, there's one thing I can do, and then the action step. So you start switching to the positive. You start moving away from, I can't do anything, to, well, maybe I can only do one thing, and then do it. After the earthquake, we were feeling very stressed. Nobody was buying training after the earthquake. Trust me, when it's going through 6 and 7 major quakes a day, who can think about training? We're at Maslow's bottom of the pyramid here, survival. So as a training company, we've got nothing to do except be shaken around all day long. So again, what could we do? Well, we could feel helpless, or we could say, well, look, let's do something. Let's offer free training for people and get ourselves in a positive mood and get ourselves out of this as well. So, and then we just advertised it, scheduled it, delivered it, and kept on doing that for about 3 months. And then things started to settle down. The earthquakes finally, after that, it took about 3 months though for them finally to settle down. So you might find something that is holding you back, and say, okay, well, what can I do? And if it's only one thing, do it. Then find another thing, do that. Suddenly you've got positive momentum and is moving forward. What I'd like to do now is look at page 7, which is looking at some of the stress principles from Dale Carnegie. These are really very simple, quite brilliant things. The first one there is live in day-type compartments. Now, what that means is, I used to be a painter and a docker in Australia. A painter and a docker is someone who, when ships come in, they dock the ships or they launch ships when they're built, and they also paint the ships. I was a ship's painter. And in the bottom of a big ship, you'll have a room about this size, actually, a ballast tank, this size. And my job was to paint the walls of that with this incredibly dangerous and toxic paint, which we didn't know about in those days. But that room seals off completely. No daylight can get in there. No air, nothing, because it's going to be full of water, and it must be very stable for the ballast of the ship. What Dale Carnegie is talking about here is do the same thing with stress. So, yesterday is yesterday. We cut that off. We live in today. We prepare for tomorrow, but we don't worry about tomorrow. Big difference. We prepare for tomorrow, but we don't worry ahead for things that have not happened yet for tomorrow. And we just work on, I'll deal with today. Right? That's what a day-type compartment is. I only will work on today, not what happened last week or yesterday, not what's going to come up. I'll prepare for it, but I'm not going to worry about it. That isolates out a lot of stress. We're carrying around a lot of stuff on our back from previous, or we're worrying about a lot of stuff in the future which hasn't happened. So we think about that as one very good exercise to break out of stress. Second one there is, you ask yourself, what's the worst that can possibly happen? Often we don't identify clearly the worry. We've got a sort of a foggy worry, it's like a mist. There's lots of worry, nothing's really clear. We're sort of worried, but we're not really clarifying what the worry is. Clarify it. What is exactly the thing, the element that is really worrying you? And hone it down to that one central element. And having honed it down to one central element, then you can start to deal with it. It's when you've got a lot of things sort of in your mind that nothing's really clear or dominant, but they're all worrying you. There's nothing to grapple with, there's nothing to grasp, there's nothing to struggle with, because it's all there. So what he's saying here is, don't do that. You pick out what's the worst that can happen, and then deal with that. Say, well, okay, this is the worst that's going to happen. I accept that might happen. What can I do about after that? What can I take as a positive step after that? The next one here, we showed those statistics before about what stress does to your health. We know about psychosomatic illnesses. We cannot leave stress alone. We have to deal with it. Otherwise it'll mount, and suddenly you've got a stroke, suddenly you've got a heart attack, or you're hospitalised, or your condition, you're constantly sick all the time because your immune system's weak because you're stressing yourself so much, is a heavy penalty for ignoring it and trying to just think somehow it'll be okay. This one, number 4, is sort of similar in a way to number 2. Having determined what's the worst thing that can happen, you say, well, what is the problem? Get to the real nub of it, the core of it, not the periphery, the really sharp single one point. What's causing this? Okay? What are some solutions, and then what's the best solution? And write it down. Writing it down brings a clarity to our thoughts. I don't know why that is, it just is. Somehow the action of thinking is one thing, but the action of writing is a separate issue that gives us more clarity. Write it down. Write it down. Think about what's the worst thing that happened, what's the core problem, why is it a problem, what's a couple of solutions, what's the best solution, and then take action on that one solution. And number 5 here is keep busy. It seems strange, but activity helps us because it takes our mind off the one nagging problem all the time, occupying our mind with other things, keeping busy. When we do nothing, if we sort of lay in bed, paralysed with fear of something bad happening or just stressed out, no energy, our mind just goes on this tremendous journey and it's all negative. Because we've got all this time to worry about it, and we give time to worry about it, and it just gets worse and worse and worse. When we're busy, we don't give so much time to it. So keeping busy is a good thing. And the law of averages, it's, I'm from Australia, and every year we do lose a small number of people to sharks, mainly surfers. They get, might lose a leg, or an arm, or a whole body, and the whole thing goes missing, But the actual number of people relative to the population, the odds of that are relatively low. You're more likely to get hit by a car than bitten by a shark. So it's the same with a lot of problems. They look like they're very intense. Oh, geez, I go surfing, it might be very dangerous, there might be sharks in there. Maybe I won't go surfing. Statistically, the odds of that actually happening are pretty remote. And the same with problems. We will give problems more credence than they deserve. We'll give them more potential than they actually statistically have. So when you actually start to work it out, what are the actual real chances of this thing I'm worrying about actually happening? You might find that the law of averages tells you it's not that likely. It's not that likely. And then you think, well, yeah, okay, maybe I will get into that activity after all. I won't have such a great fear. And cooperate with the inevitable. When it's a point of something you cannot resist anymore, it's just going to happen. Say, for example, the company's going to downsize and your whole department's going, or you're going. And there's nothing you can do about that. There's no point stressing about it. That's inevitable. So stop stressing about it and start getting on the front foot of what can be done. Well, how do you start preparing for the next step? Because if you turn up to the interviews for the next job and you're totally morose, depressed, negative, what are your chances of getting the job? Not good. Not good. So it's going to happen. So your mind says, okay, I will now accept this is going to happen. I will prepare for it. You mentioned about deadlines. You're going to miss the deadline. Your child is sick. You are needed. That deadline's not going to happen. You just say, well, the deadline's not going to happen. I'm going to tell them the deadline's not going to happen. You have to roll without my article or roll without my contribution. It will not be the end of the world. It will not be the end of your career. You cooperate with the inevitable and then you try and work forward. So again, we look at things that are real and we decide which ones we cannot control and we roll with it and we work to the next stage. And then decide how much anxiety thing may be worth and refusing it more. And this is a very key thing. We tend to have no limit on our anxiety. We just keep increasing our anxiety levels without any ceiling. And it becomes very overwhelming. So we might say, yes, I'm very worried about this, but am I going to worry about it this week? That's it. I'm only going to worry about it for this week. Come Monday, I'm not going to worry about this anymore. I'm going to do all my worrying this week, do all my planning or whatever. This week, I'm going to deal with that. And I'm not going to give it any more worry. Set a time limit. You can't say, well, I won't worry. Of course you're going to worry. It's a worrying thing, but don't let it be endless. Say, I will, today, in the frame of today, I'm going to worry about this, but from tomorrow, I'm not worrying about it anymore. I'm going to cap it and just move on. Take some actions and move on. Now we have, I love this one. So if parents, bosses, okay, expecting gratitude. If we think that all the things we're doing are going to be appreciated, recognized, commented on, we are setting ourselves up for failure. Because they won't be. Your staff are never going to recognise what you're doing for them. They're not going to recognise how hard you're working. They're not going to recognise the sacrifices you're making. They're not going to recognise the time that you're putting into something, because they're all worried about themselves. Same with children. Children expect things to happen, and they don't really understand the parents. Well, maybe they're very much older. But if you expect that your children are going to appreciate you, or expect that your employees, staff, or workmates are going to appreciate you, you'll be a long time waiting for that, potentially. So if you work on the other side, you say, well, I don't expect it. In fact, I expect ingratitude. Go the other, I expect ingratitude. So then if someone does recognise you, wow, that's a massive bonus. But you weren't defeated and you weren't depressed because you weren't expecting in the first place. So you switch gears a little bit mentally. But some people need that. Some people need to be recognised and they don't get it and they are permanently unhappy. They just got to switch mental gears and then come around that. And then count your blessings, not your troubles. You know, if we ask you to do those positive memos before about professional and personal, and I'm sure if I gave you an hour and I said, write down for the next hour every single thing you have to be happy about, you would come up with a massive list. A massive list. We're in Japan. It is a very safe country. We have rule of law. The Japanese are very polite. They're very honest. Everything works here. Quality control is very good. You know, we're in a certain time zone that suits certain elements of business. We're close to Asia. It's the growth engine of the universe for the next, numbers of centuries. There are, in your company, in your organization, there are so many wonderful things that are happening. So many things. We're in the Tokyo American Club, which is a phenomenal facility. You know, we have access to this. We can come and have this opportunity to lunch and learn. The list would be big. But because we are stressing ourselves by focusing on what we don't have, we sometimes forget the other side of it. So don't neglect the blessings we have as opposed to just the troubles, because we often occupy ourselves with the troubles. So these are very, 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 very simple ideas from Dale Carnegie. But boy, they have a lot of power. And so on the back here, you've got one page here. Think about one of those things that were stressing you, that you nominated the most stressful thing. So what is it? Then what are you going to do about it? How will you overcome this stress? And when will you start? So just take a moment. Nominate what the stress is. What are you going to do to overcome it? And when are you going to start? Please go ahead. Everyone here took an action commitment. And you remember I said at the beginning, I wasn't afraid because it had something to do with the quote from that pilot. And the same with our stresses. It's the not nominating what it is and calling it out, not deciding what we're going to do about it and setting a deadline that just lets it roll on. But all of you have picked out one key item that's an issue for you, and you've applied a formula to that. Now you're going to take action. You're now positive. So if you think about the other stresses you've got, it's the same replicable approach. As it comes up, you call it out, nominate what's got to be done, set a deadline, and start doing it. Are there any questions about anything we've covered today? All good? Okay, well thank you very much and good luck with your commitments, and I hope that they work out for you. Thank you very much for coming.
Thank you.
Thank you.